What if I told you that every thought you've ever had wasn't truly yours? That the inner voice narrating your life, the one that feels like you, is actually an echo, a patchwork of things you didn't choose: your culture, your parents, your religion, the voices you heard as a child, the fears you absorbed without words, the expectations that wrapped themselves around your soul before you even knew what a soul was. You were born into a world mid-sentence, and you've been trying to finish that sentence ever since. Most people believe they're thinking, but what they're really doing is remembering, replaying loops, rehearsing scripts, reacting to cues they didn't design, and yet they call it my opinion, my truth, my decision. But look closer, and you'll see the mind is not original. It's inherited. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What he meant is this: until you see the source of your thoughts, you're not living, you're being lived. So ask yourself, who taught you what to believe? Who handed you your definition of success, of love, of good and bad? You didn't choose your language, your name, your first set of rules. You didn't choose your wounds, yet they shape your worldview. And still, we walk around defending our thoughts like sacred truths, never once asking, who put them there? Because the moment you do, everything begins to shift. You begin to see the mind not as you, but as a program. And if it's a program, then maybe, just maybe, you can rewrite it. You didn't choose your thoughts, but you inherited them, like an unseen heirloom, passed down not through blood, but through belief, through dinner table silences, through the way your parents flinched at certain topics, through the tension in a room when someone said the wrong thing. Long before you understood language, you understood fear. Long before you formed opinions, you absorbed emotional truths. This is the hidden architecture of the mind, not logic, but imprint, not facts, but frequency. You absorbed the emotional temperature of your home and mistook it for reality. You heard what got rewarded. You learned what got punished. And without knowing it, you edited yourself to survive. This is how conditioning begins, not with violence, but with repetition, with invisible rules, with unspoken contracts. Don't talk about that. Be nice. Don't cry. Be strong. Be small. And the more you obeyed, the more the world seemed to make sense. But what was really happening is that your nervous system was wiring itself for belonging, even if it meant betrayal. The betrayal of your own truth, your curiosity, your wildness, your voice. You didn't choose this, but now you live inside it. A maze of beliefs that you call your personality. A library of other people's rules that you call you. And here's the paradox. The more it hurts, the more tightly you cling to it. Because if these beliefs aren't real, then who are you without them? What would it mean if the voice in your head wasn't yours at all, but a ghost? A shadow of every should and shouldn't that was whispered into your nervous system before you had the strength to say no? This is not a crisis. This is an awakening. The moment you start asking, what do I believe? And why? Not to rebel, not to burn it all down, but to remember that you are not your programming. You are the one who sees it. Have you ever truly watched your thoughts? Not followed them, not argued with them, not believed or resisted them, but simply watched? Sit still for just a moment and observe what happens inside your mind. A memory, a to-do list, a fear, a judgment, another thought judging the last one, then a random image, your childhood bedroom, then back to the fear again. It's a river, isn't it? Endless, relentless, unfiltered. And most of us, we live swept up in its current. We mistake the voice of the river for the voice of the self. But what if you're not the thoughts? What if you're the watcher, the still presence behind them, the space they pass through? Because here's the truth. Thoughts arise uninvited. They come from nowhere, and they vanish just as easily. You don't choose their arrival. You don't control their content. And if you really pay attention, you'll notice something shocking. The voice in your head contradicts itself. It tells you to chase success, then whispers that you're not good enough to have it. It tells you to speak up, then punishes you for being too much. It craves intimacy, then sabotages the moment someone gets close. This voice is not wisdom. It's noise, conditioned, fragmented, echoing generations of pain and protection, and yet we obey it. Not because we trust it, but because we never learned we could question it. Carl Jung called this the unconscious shadow, the parts of us we disown, the fears we inherit, the false identities we wear to stay safe. And until we face it, we don't think our thoughts. Our thoughts think us. They shape how we move, how we love, how we limit ourselves. But here's the miracle. The moment you observe a thought, really observe it, you reclaim the power to choose. You realize, I don't have to believe everything I think. And that simple insight, that quiet act of noticing, that's the beginning of liberation. Because the watcher is not broken, the watcher is not afraid, the watcher is not the storm, it is the stillness behind it, the I before identity, the presence beneath the programming, and it's been waiting for you to notice all along. Once you see the voice in your head isn't really you, everything starts to shift. But awareness alone isn't enough. If you don't act from that awareness, you'll be pulled right back into the trance, because your mind, it doesn't surrender easily. It's spent years, decades, building its identity. It says, this is who I am. I overthink. I self-sabotage. I always mess things up. But those aren't truths. They're programs, scripts you inherited, loops you never chose. This is the turning point. When you stop calling your patterns personality, when you stop mistaking trauma responses for instincts, when you stop confusing your conditioning with your calling. Because the truth is, you've been living in a mind designed for survival, not self-expression, for fitting in, not standing out, for avoiding pain, not pursuing purpose. Your mind is a map of every experience you didn't fully process, every belief you absorbed without consent, every emotion you buried because the world told you it wasn't safe to feel. And that's okay. You did what you had to do to stay afloat. But now, you're waking up, and waking up hurts. You'll grieve the old self, the one who believed every thought, the one who feared silence, the one who needed validation to feel real. But what rises in its place is sovereign, not perfect, not free from fear, but no longer controlled by it. You'll begin to notice your triggers without becoming them. You'll begin to feel your emotions without being ruled by them. You'll begin to choose your response instead of reenacting your past. And in that space between thought and action, your true self returns. Not the one the world told you to be, not the one you built to survive, but the one that's been watching, patient, quiet, undamaged, and once you taste that freedom, you'll never again confuse noise with truth, because the mind is a servant, not a master, and your soul, it was never yours to find, only yours to remember. There's a moment, quiet, often unnoticed, when you realize the thoughts are still coming, but you're no longer chasing them. They float through like clouds across the sky, and for once, you don't follow the storm. This is when the shift becomes real. You stop needing to understand why every thought appears. You stop trying to win arguments in your head. You stop being seduced by your own stories of lack, shame, or fear, because you've glimpsed something deeper, the you that watches, the stillness beneath the noise, the presence behind the persona. And once that witnessing self takes root, the entire architecture of your reality begins to reorganize. Things you used to obsess over, they lose their grip. The people you tried to impress, they fade from your center. The thoughts that used to feel like facts now feel like passing weather. And in their absence, you begin to hear something new. Not a voice from the mind, but a pull from the soul. It doesn't speak in language, it speaks in resonance, a feeling, a knowing, a magnetic yes. This is not self-improvement. This is self-remembrance. You're not becoming something. You're unbecoming everything you were never meant to be. The false self, the one built from thoughts you didn't choose, begins to crack. And through those cracks, the light gets in. Not just lightness of mood, but a lightness of being. You laugh more easily. You breathe more deeply. You stop trying to solve life and start being lived by it. Not aimlessly, not passively, but with a quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't need to control anything, because it trusts everything. This is the moment when thought loses its crown, and awareness takes the throne. Most people spend their entire lives trying to prove they're in control, that they're smart enough, disciplined enough, rational enough to hold it all together. But the truth is, control was never the goal. Clarity is. And clarity doesn't come from thinking more. It comes from identifying less with the thinker. Because the mind, left unchecked, will run your life. It will plan your day, narrate your worth, replay your past, and script your future. It will shout over your instincts, doubt your joy, punish your stillness, and demand you justify your every step. But once you stop trying to be your thoughts and start witnessing them instead, you realize something sacred. You were never your conditioning. You were the consciousness it passed through. This realization is not loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It comes in the way you pause before reacting, in the way you choose to speak or not, in the way you start living from truth instead of for approval. You no longer need to be liked. You need to be real. You no longer need to explain yourself. You need to understand yourself. And you no longer need permission, because now you have your own. This is the initiation of inner authority. The moment you realize that wisdom doesn't scream, it whispers. It doesn't arrive from textbooks or timelines. It emerges in the silence after a triggered thought passes, and you didn't act on it. It reveals itself when the old self would have argued, but the new self simply sees. Not because you've become detached, but because you've become sovereign. And here's the paradox. The less you try to control your mind, the more aligned your mind becomes. Because when the soul leads, the thoughts begin to follow. Not with noise, but with clarity. Not with fear, but with precision. Your mind becomes a tool, not a tyrant, and from that place, You no longer walk through life wondering who you are. You carry the answer in how you move, how you respond, how you hold your peace even when the world invites chaos. So now you see it. You've spent years chasing self-control without realizing you were never the one in the driver's seat. Not fully. You inherited a mind shaped by survival, conditioned by culture, trained by repetition. And yet, you thought it was you. But the moment you step back, not with judgment, but with awareness, everything begins to shift. Because the thoughts that once defined you begin to dissolve when you no longer cling to them as truth. And in that space, between reaction and awareness, a deeper presence arrives. It doesn't argue, it doesn't strive, it simply sees. That is the beginning of freedom. Because when you're no longer run by thoughts you didn't choose, you become the chooser. You become the observer, the architect, the still point behind the storm. And it's here, in this sacred pause, that your real life begins. Not a life based on fear, or programming, or proving, but a life shaped from the inside out. One thought at a time, one breath at a time, one conscious choice at a time. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But now, you see the machinery, you see the old voices, you see the ghost programs pretending to be truth. And you choose differently. Not because you're trying to fix yourself, but because you've finally remembered. You were never broken. You were just buried beneath thoughts that didn't belong to you. So now, when the same old patterns return, when the doubt rises, when the voice in your head whispers limitations, don't fight it, don't suppress it, don't obey it. Just notice it, smile, and return to the space behind the thought. That's where you live now. That's where freedom breathes. That's where your true self was waiting all along.